Hello everybody, T.D.F.M here. Currently here in my bathtub, yet again, as you can see. And today I want to discuss a little bit of a life story of mine. I finally want to give at least a condensed rundown of how I got the scar on my face, because I decided that I pretty much need to start helping out the lore of myself while I still can. So today I'm going to be giving you a condensed version of what exactly happened in that particular event, so maybe you understand me and my life experiences or mentality, way of thinking better. Alright, so the story behind this scar, the condensed version, is that I was going to a secondary alternative school in New York State by the name of Baker Hall School in Lackawanna, New York. Also, today's date is January 25th. January 25th of 2026, I forgot to say. Going to a secondary alternative school known as Baker Hall School in Lackawanna, New York. I was going there, I hated going there, alongside the other alternative schools I went to, like Stanley G. Falk or Dexter Terrence or whatever, but this one specifically was Baker Hall School. Here, I'll show you a picture of Baker Hall School. That is Baker Hall School. This is the building where this occurred in Lackawanna, New York. I was going to this school, which was a secondary alternative school. While I was going there, an individual in the class that I was in, who I will not name, even though I want to, because I'm concerned about censorship now because of what happened with my last video with that girl I was talking about. I was going to school, and a certain individual in my class decided one day, for some reason, that they were going to start to try and, mess with me or harass me. I guess start to try to bully me. And this, I wasn't having any of that. So I stood up to this person pretty much immediately, like literally only 2 times it took for this person to mess with me in order for me to stand up to them like this. I stood up to them and challenged them to a fight, because they were antagonizing me, and I wasn't about to come in there every day and have this person try to harass me and fuck with me just because they felt like they could. So I felt obligated to stand up to this person, which is exactly what I proceeded to do. This person stood up like they were willing to fight me back. I started to come at this person to fight them, and then instead of actually fighting me like an actual tough person or gangster person would, this individual decided to pick up pretty much this object right here, pick up that object, which is as you can see, heavy gauge steel object, and then throw it into my face and head, and bounce it off my face and head, and give me an open depressed fracture to my skull and a traumatic brain hemorrhage or brain bleed. And my facial scar, you can see, hold on a second. My facial scar, you can see that open depressed fracture of my skull. That is what you see depicted in my facial scar, is that open depressed fracture. Depression in the bone of my skull, which is the dent, and you can see the laceration line right there, because it was open. Depressed fracture. Now they gave me that alongside a traumatic brain hemorrhage or brain bleed, which is bleeding in your skull around your brain due to the physical trauma of what they did. And that's not a little boo-boo. That's a potentially fatal injury, fatal head injury that can cause death. I remember after they did this to me, after they threw it in my face and bounced it off my head, I flew back a couple of few feet, and I went down on my butt on the floor with my legs out in front of me, and I felt this sensation of like a rapid progressive headache spread across my head for like a couple of few seconds, which was the blood initially pooling out and spreading out in my skull around my brain. Then I had a big adrenaline and anger dump because of what this individual did, and understandably so. I got back up. I didn't stay down. I got back up. I came back at this person. But then the art teacher, because we were in art class at Baker Hall School when this happened, got in the way, protected this person from me. I did some stuff, physically, but we never fought head on just because I could never get to him, because he used this object as a shield and hid behind it and then threw it like a little boy into my face and head, causing me these serious and nearly fatal head injuries as a result of doing what he did. The school we were going to called the police. Police came to school and paramedics. Police arrested him for doing what he did. And then paramedics took me to the hospital in the back of an ambulance. When I was in the back of the ambulance, at that point the adrenaline wore off. I went from feeling fine, like how I am now, just completely fine, completely casual, to feeling like an intense, throbbing, pounding headache, like borderline unbearably bad. I literally remember thinking to myself as I was in the back of the ambulance, okay, now this is starting to get bad. Now it's starting to get unpleasant, because before I felt fine because of the adrenaline. But at that point it started to get really bad. Throbbing, pounding headache. It felt like as if someone sawed off my skull cap and took my skull cap off and just took a bunch of random stuff and just jammed it in my skull around my brain. And then put the skull cap back on and then bolted it back on. And then you could just feel that. You could just feel this foreign presence in your head. That's how it felt, physically. That's how I would describe the sensation of this throbbing, pounding headache. It just felt like there was something in my head that wasn't supposed to be there. And that's pretty much literally what was happening. That something is the blood that was in my skull. Due to the trauma of what he did. It wasn't supposed to be there. So that's what it felt like, sensation-wise, and it's also pretty much physically, literally what was happening. Because it was blood in my head that was supposed to be there. Because of the trauma, physical trauma of what, he did. And more of a condensed version, but, got the emergency at the hospital. It progressed over time. I was feeling pretty much myself getting weaker. My level of consciousness going down gradually over time. Literally dying because of this injury this person gave me. Because my brain was decompressed in my skull. Literally killing me. Literally dying. That's why I was feeling these symptoms of progressive weakness and, consciousness going down. To the point where even just basic shit felt hard. I remember one time a nurse, while I was in there, gave me a paper towel to put on my wound area. And I couldn't even do that. Couldn't even keep it there. I was like, I brought it back down. I couldn't hold it there. I was so physically weak, I couldn't even hold a fucking paper towel to my wound area because I was getting weak, because I was literally dying because of what this person did. But again, a traumatic brain hemorrhage or brain bleed, that's not a little boo-boo. That's a potentially fatal head injury that could cause death. And that's what this was doing to me. It was literally killing me. But obviously in the long run, I ended up surviving, obviously, because I'm still here. And then I survived. But the psychological trauma and the severe brain injury of this event still linger to this day. And maybe someday I'll go into more detail of what exactly happened. More in-depth details, But here's the condensed version, just so you have an idea of a basic understanding of this. And that's not even the only time I've almost died before. A year or not even a year after this happened, when I was just barely 17 years old, in mid-January of 2016, I nearly died again after I was suffocated for a half an hour straight. I nearly killed that way. From a severe and untreated respiratory failure, and nearly died again, and also was severely brain injured again due to hypoxia, hypoxic brain injury, which is where your brain cells die because they're not getting oxygen, because your brain cells need oxygen to live. But that's a story for another time. This is just a little, again, condensed version of what happened. So imagine I take this and I throw it in your face and head and bounce it off your face and head, and that is pretty much exactly what this person did to me. And then you can understand why it did so much damage to me and caused me the injuries that it caused me. So that's my little condensed lore story. I guess I decided I need to start pumping out the lore of myself while I still can. And yeah, I'm back here in my freaking bathroom again. So, back here in the tub. So yeah, see you on the next one, I guess.